Good morning and welcome. Can I acknowledge, of course, Premier John Brumby, Minister Mr Gavin Jennings, Mr Glenn Boreham, who's the Managing Director of IBM Australia and New Zealand, many senior staff from IBM, colleagues and partners from the University of Melbourne and beyond, friends from the media. It's a delight to see you all here this morning. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the Sidney Myer Asia Centre for an announcement of great significance, we think, for the future of the life sciences here in Australia. Of course, in welcoming you here, it's important to begin with the tradition of honouring and acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this university stands, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. This morning's announcement builds on the State Government's June 2008 commitment to the Victorian Life Sciences Computation Initiative. And I must say, from a university perspective, that research into the life sciences is one of the most exciting and important fields of investigation today. It's particularly great to be celebrating that in the presence of Professor Peter Doherty, who's here this morning, part of the extraordinary team here in Victoria committed to the life sciences. It's important too that we acknowledge with gratitude the Victorian Government and IBM Australia and their continuing commitment, along with our partner institutes and our many talented researchers here at the university. We think bringing this group together will create the precinct to be one of the great life science research centres in the world. And I say generosity because the commitment from both the state government under Premier Brumby and IBM is extremely substantial, as you'll hear. But we see this, and we're grateful for it, as an enlightened generosity, because it's more than a financial investment. It's a social investment. It will have impact on medical research. It will bring substantial benefits to the people of Victoria and beyond. So, Mr Premier, we're always delighted to see you at the university, and I might add quickly that on your last visit, not many months ago, with the Federal Health Minister, you announced strong support for another outstanding and forward-thinking initiative, the Parkville Comprehensive Cancer Centre. So with a track record like that, any time you wish to visit, please join us. I know that announcement, like this morning's, will inspire experts in the field. It will give them confidence and enthusiasm about the future of the life sciences in Victoria and a sense of just what's possible in this state. So without further ado, can I call upon the Premier of Victoria, the Honourable John Brumby, to make today's announcement. John.
Well, can I thank Glenn Davis very much for his introduction, and to all of our distinguished guests here this morning, can I particularly acknowledge Gavin Jennings, the Minister for Innovation, Peter Doherty, standing at the back of the room, Nobel Prize winner, and if my memory is correct, I think it would have been 3 or 4 years ago at a Murdoch lecture at the State Library where Peter was the guest speaker, and I think I introduced Peter, but I remember that speech, and if I understood it correctly, Peter was talking about cancer research and biotechnology and linking that to the extraordinary amount of data and information and files, and that if we had the power of a supercomputer in the future to help analyse that, to put all of that information together, how profound a difference it would make in the treatment of specialised cancers. Is that a fair synopsis? Absolutely, I don't know. You're very kind. It's a passable synopsis. Anyway, that speech made quite an impression on me, and today, of course, I think we're able to see part of that vision, which I know so many people in this room have had today, including Peter, brought to fruition. To Dr. Tilak Algawala, the Vice President of Systems of IBM Global, to Glenn Boreham, of course, the Managing Director of IBM Australia and New Zealand, to the Chancellor of the University today, Alex Chernoff. I understand the US Consul General was hoping to be here, to Michael Thurston, and to AJ Roura, the Senior Manager, Computational Biology Centre, IBM Thomas Watson Research Centre from the USA. Can I begin my comments today by acknowledging traditional owners and pay my respects to elders past and present. And can I thank Glenn Davis for his generous introduction. And I think, in fact, I've been here a couple of times over the last few months. One was for an announcement actually about the Centre for the Broadband Enabled Society, which is another great partnership that we have with Melbourne University, and which again is a great initiative as we particularly look to broadband and the investment that we make in IT to profoundly improve and change our society. And of course the Comprehensive Cancer Centre, which is a magnificent partnership between our government, the Rudd government, more than $1 billion in total. Gavin and I and the Federal Minister for Health announced last year. But we hope to build that Comprehensive Cancer Centre into one of the 10 best in the world, sort of built around the model of the Sloan Kettering in New York, bringing together that wonderful treatment and also that outstanding research. And of course all of these things are so linked. These are all linked. The precinct is linked, and then these investments, whether it's the CCC, whether it's the supercomputer that we're talking about today, whether it's the Centre for a Broadband-Enabled Society. So today's pretty exciting. Today, as I think back on the timing of this, we were in San Diego for the Biotech Congress in June 2008, and if my memory is correct, with Gavin, it's there that we announced our $50 million contribution in advance towards this partnership. And so it's an exciting partnership, and today, of course, we're talking about a $100 million partnership. It's a partnership between our government, the University of Melbourne, and of course, today we welcome IBM into this partnership. And when we talk about this partnership, we're talking about a partnership that is going to deliver one of the world's most powerful supercomputers, and it's going to deliver that to Melbourne and to our state. It's a computer that will dramatically increase our capacities in life sciences. And of course, if you think about life sciences, you think about biotechnology, there's no better place to be doing that than here in Parkville. Every day in Parkville, we have something like 10,000 researchers who are working in ICT and the life sciences. This is probably one of the highest concentrations in what's a relatively small space anywhere in the world. And that concentration of researchers doesn't just happen by accident. As you know, our government made a decision very early on, back in 2001, that in terms of biotechnology, life sciences, IT, we wanted to be out there in front and we wanted to be the national leader in this space. And we said that because and I remember when I was Minister for Innovation, I used to often say that biotechnology in so many ways was really the world's fourth great revolution. And it is. You think we've gone through our agricultural revolution, our industrial revolution, we're moving through the IT revolution, and we're really still at the dawn of what is a great new era. It's driven in large part by the IT revolution that provides, if you like, the intellectual grunt for a lot of what we do in that life sciences area. But there is no doubt that this is the world's fourth great revolution. And so you see that at work here in this precinct. And of course, when you think of life sciences, it is going to transform the way in which we live our lives. And so whether that's treating previously untreatable diseases, whether it's finding the best treatment or the cures for childhood cancers, whether it's new ways of managing land or resources, healthier foods, better fuels, fibres, the possibilities are endless. You know, when we announced our first biotech plan back in 2001, the then Premier Steve Braxton and I did that over at Bio. We set a target. We wanted Victoria to be one of the top 5 locations in the world for biotechnology. And of course there were many people who said, well, we'll never any prospect, little place like Victoria, of ever achieving that. But in fact, when you look at a number of the criteria that we established, we are up there in many areas with the top 5 performers anywhere in the world. And it's a performance that we want to keep and replicate in the future. And if you think, of course, of this precinct, we've got the Bio21 Molecular Science and Biotechnology Institute here at the University of Melbourne. Again, a great partnership, but one that couldn't have happened without the significant financial contribution that we made early in government. I mentioned the $1 billion Comprehensive Cancer Centre, great partnership involving, of course, the Rudd government as well. The Australian synchrotron in Clayton at Monash University wouldn't have happened without the significant commitment, the $150 million that we put up front to make sure that this investment was dragged forward for Australia and that we won the location of it here in Victoria. And then, of course, all of our great medical research institutes, some of them, of course, here today. The Florey Neurosciences Institute, the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, and, of course, Australia's oldest medical research institute, just across the campus here in Parkville, the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute. And of course, on top of all that, again, over at Monash University, the National Stem Cell Centre. There's very few cities anywhere in the world that have that concentration of scientific facilities. And I think it was a couple of years ago now, it was the Times Education Supplement, their annual ranking, the best medical research and life sciences precincts in the world. We had 2 in the top 20. One was around Parkville here, the other was around Monash. There were only 2 other cities in the world that had 2 universities in the top 20. One was London and the other was Boston. And so in every sense, we're up there and we're punching above our weight. And it's a great story to tell about our state. You go back, of course, to the history of WEHI, 1915, and the foundation endeavour, or the quote, was to be the birthplace of discoveries, rendering signal service to mankind in the prevention and removal of disease and the mitigation of suffering. And WEHI, of course, has been true to that endeavour. And I think the technology might have changed, and in a sense today is a story about technology, but it's still the fundamental efforts that still drive our efforts in life sciences remain the same. And that is that you've got to get and have the best, you've got to attract the best people. And again, I think we do that in Melbourne. We bring the best people from all around the world. But you can't keep the best people unless you have the best precincts, the best lifestyle, and the best facilities and technology to go with that. And I believe that we've got all of the parts of that equation right to ensure that we can power ahead in this regard. And of course, today is about this exciting step forward on the Victorian Life Sciences Computation Initiative. It's one part of that jigsaw, of that mosaic that goes to make up that story. It's great to be able to welcome IBM as part of this partnership today. It really is. IBM supercomputer will be working here in 2012. The supercomputer, I don't know if we're going to hear more about it today, is truly mind-boggling. So I think, if my memory is correct, when we were in San Diego, we talked about 400 teraflops, and I thought that was pretty fast, but this is going to be 800 teraflops? Yes? Yep, just here. For those of you who've never encountered a teraflop, it's 1 trillion calculations a second. Is that right? Yeah. So that's faster than I do push-ups in the morning. That's pretty quick. So it's an extraordinarily powerful supercomputer, and I'm told that by today's standards, the 6th most powerful supercomputer in the world and the most powerful dedicated to life sciences anywhere. And of course, these things they sort of march forward, and I'm sure there'll be other supercomputers in the future that will overtake us. But this is, at this point in time, right out there in front of what the world is doing. I think it's going to be an incredibly powerful tool, an extraordinary tool. If you're talking about the war that's waged against cancer, as I started my remarks, cardiovascular disease, neurological disease, diabetes, so many other areas where we've got brilliant researchers and brilliant facilities, but this is just another very powerful tool to aid that work. I think in some ways we don't truly know what will come of this supercomputer. We haven't done it before. We haven't had a tool this powerful. That's what makes it so exciting. That's what makes it so positive, I think, for our state. I do want to thank the University of Melbourne for their ambition to be at the forefront of biotechnology, and indeed all of the people in this room today. It's an ambition that we share passionately as a government. And can I say this too about IBM and the team here today? Can we thank them for their confidence also in our state and Victoria? Back in 2002, we were a fairly new government. I was the Minister for Regional Development, the Minister for Innovation. We worked hard then to attract IBM to Ballarat, was to get IBM established there in Ballarat. Their role now, they are the region's biggest employer. today. I was up just before Christmas. We opened another facility there with another 350 people. IBM, I think, consistently has shown great confidence in the strength of our economy here in Victoria and our vision for a high-tech future based around IT and based around the life sciences. And so can I wish everybody here today the best with this project. The next step, can I say to IBM again, we thank them for their partnership. This is a great partnership. It's a partnership with our government, with the university, with, if I can call it, the science community and with IBM, and I think we will see the benefits of this partnership in the years and decades to come in the improved technologies, the improved applications, the improvements in health, in lifestyle, in scientific endeavour that will come as a result of this new supercomputing investment. So well done, it's a great day for our state.
Premier Brumby, it's a delight to hear you announce the fastest life science computer in the world to be based here in Melbourne. I was remiss in not joining you in welcoming our Chancellor, Alex Chernoff, who's been a very enthusiastic supporter of this project. It's now a delight to call on two of the colleagues in the partnership. Glenn Boreham is the Managing Director of IBM Australia and New Zealand, and he'll be followed by Tilak Ajawala, who's the Vice President Systems of IBM Research internationally. Glenn.
Thank you, Premier, Minister, Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor and the many, many distinguished guests that we have in the audience here today. As a business person rather than a scientist or researcher, I'm somewhat in awe of the scientific brain power that we have in the room today, which is why, in a very brief moment, I'll ask my IBM colleague, Dr. Tilak Agarwal, who's our Vice President from the IBM Research Labs, to come up and say a few words. But before I do that, I thought I would try and put into context what I think is a momentous announcement into some lay people terms. As the Premier has mentioned, as a result of what we are announcing today, Melbourne is going to be the home of the largest installation of IBM Blue Gene computing in the whole of the Southern Hemisphere. And the Premier made the comment that it will be one of the 6 largest life sciences computation facilities in the world. We actually think it's now in the top 5. So as we speak, we're heading up the world scale and in the right direction. But this is, you know, the top 5 facilities in the world here in the city of Melbourne. This is incredibly important beyond the obvious significance to the scientific community, but for all Australians. You see, supercomputers are truly accelerating at an incredible rate the breakthroughs that were, excuse me, the breakthroughs that we're able to make in life sciences. And maybe we can put it to fixing croaky voices. But medical research, as many people in the room know, used to be done in test tubes, what we'd call in vitro, you know, within the glass. And now scientists are performing experiments in silico, within the computer. And it's allowing scientists to rapidly move into new worlds of discovery. And to say that the human body is complex is clearly an understatement. To do the sorts of computations that we're going to do on these supercomputers with normal high-capacity computers, the things that may run a bank or may run an airline, would have previously taken a couple of years. To run computation on the human protein would have taken over 2 years for scientists to get a result. And as a result of using Blue Gene, output, data, information will be available to our scientists within a few days, which means this life sciences co-laboratory will allow us to very quickly reach new areas of exploration that, as the Premier mentioned, some of which we haven't even envisaged today. For those of you who are science fiction fans, the Blue Gene is much like warp speed on the Enterprise. But it will accelerate our goal, an important goal, of finding effective treatments for infectious disease and conditions like cancer, epilepsy and Alzheimer's. And I can't tell you how proud, truly proud IBM is to be part of this initiative, to be a part of a role for the health of Australia and also the world. And I would like to close my remarks by just commenting on the state of Victoria and the support that we have seen from the Minister and the Premier and the whole of the Victorian government. I think, and this is being beamed around Australia, so I will risk offending some people, but our relationship with the Victorian government is the best in the country. We now have over 1,300 people employed in Ballarat. This is a really exciting start date on a relationship with the university and the Parkville precinct. But it has only happened because of personal commitment and support and cooperation from the Victorian government, and it is right to recognise that today. So I'm delighted to bring my colleague up to the stage from IBM Research, Dr. Tilat Agarwal.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. Thank you, Premier. It's a real pleasure to be here. And for those of you who have not encountered a teraflop, you will soon be encountering petaflops. And then in the not too distant future, you will encounter exaflops as well. At least that's the vision. Now, I want to just say a few words about our thought process in research. We are very, very committed to solving some of the very significant, challenging problems that we face in society today. And it is very, very clear to us that breakthroughs will happen only when we see very tight collaboration between government, between business, and between research institutions and academic institutions. So collaborate. That is one of our big opportunities, and it's something that we intend to do aggressively. Now, secondly, it has also become very, very clear to us, and in IBM at least, we did this, we've come to this conclusion quite some time ago, that true innovation does not happen when scientists confine themselves to their own local labs. In fact, we believe very strongly that innovation happens with collaboration, but also when scientists immerse themselves in the real world, looking at the real variables, looking at the real data, and trying to really make sense of it and truly sort of immerse themselves in the real world. In fact, it's fair to say that our mantra in research, in IBM research now, is that the world is our laboratory. And we really, really believe in that. And I'm really excited. This is a big step for us. But I'm really excited that we have announced this life sciences collaboratory, the biggest supercomputer in the Southern Hemisphere, the biggest IBM research collaboration around life sciences, and on and on and on. There are several firsts over here. And I'm delighted because this collaboratory is based on these two sort of guiding principles that I talked about. Collaborate and think of the world as your laboratory. And I think if we keep this in mind, we'll be very successful. Now, I'm also convinced, based on everything that I have seen, this is my first trip to Australia. I apologize for that, but I got here as quickly as I could. And I think that there are going to be some dramatic improvements in medicine and things that are important to us as a society and as human beings if we can actually take all of this technology prowess that we have, that we are bringing to Melbourne, and apply it to some of these really difficult problems in a living lab sort of environment. So with that, I'm again very excited to be here. I'd like to acknowledge the support that we've gotten from the state of Victoria and the Premier from the University of Melbourne. And in particular, I'd like to acknowledge Peter Radjan and all of his support, because as many of you know, we would not have been here today without Peter's vision. Peter, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
The research and supercomputing capabilities of Victorian life sciences researchers is set to be dramatically increased by a University of Melbourne and IBM partnership. IBM will establish a collaboratory with the University of Melbourne to bring together scientists from the Victorian Life Sciences Computational Initiative and the IBM Research Computational Biology Centre. The partnership will enable thousands of world-class life sciences and medical researchers in the Melbourne area to work with computational biology experts, providing them with access to high-performance computing, including IBM's Blue Gene supercomputer, to study human disease. The collaboration is dedicated to dramatic improvements in human health through technology innovation, in medical diagnostics, drug discovery and drug design, underpinned by a deep understanding of disease. The collaboratory will be located at the University of Melbourne within the Parkville precinct, home to leading medical research institutions. The partnership with the University of Melbourne will form the first IBM research collaboratory in the Southern Hemisphere and is the first time IBM has established a collaboratory in life sciences anywhere in the world. The partnership will further raise the international profile of Victoria and Australia as a life sciences precinct equal to the best in the world.
And to close, we thought it was important to hear from some of the researchers who will use this technology to make the breakthroughs we've heard about. So our panel of experts this morning start with Ajay Royaru, Melissa Southey and Terry O'Brien. Ajay heads the Computational Biology Centre at IBM Research. He's someone we've come to know well over the last year and we're always delighted when he spends time with us on campus. He's a graduate of universities in Mumbai and New Delhi and of one of the world's leading cancer research centres, the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Centre in New York. He's played a leading role in the worldwide genographic project in which a number of our researchers have also been heavily involved. Associate Professor Melissa Southey is a University of Melbourne researcher, a graduate who today heads the Genetic Epidemiology Laboratory within the Department of Pathology here. She's engaged in important research work into identifying cancer susceptibility genes. And Professor Terry O'Brien, who we also proudly claim as a Melbourne researcher, is head of the Department of Medicine at the Royal Melbourne and Western Hospitals, a department that engages in research across a wide range of illnesses and diseases, with a focus on translating research into care, or what the department calls bench-to-bedside research. So please, we'll hear from each of these experts just briefly, and they'll be enthusiastic about answering your questions afterwards. Please.
Thank you very much, Professor Davis. I'm Terry O'Brien from the Department of Medicine at Royal Melbourne, and I'm just going to give you a very brief thumbnail sketch of how this partnership between IBM and the University of Melbourne and our world-class teaching hospitals that are affiliated with the University of Melbourne can really deliver outcomes that will make real-life improvements in healthcare for our patients. I'm a clinical neurologist and I specialise in the treatment and research of epilepsy. And epilepsy is a bit of a silent illness in that it is the most common serious neurological illness in the community, but it's most people with epilepsy, you wouldn't know they have it because unless they actually have a seizure, they're otherwise function in normal life like everybody else. But that fear of having a seizure, which can occur at any time, it can occur while you're talking at a lectern, it can occur while you're driving a car, while you're swimming, having a bath, is the most disabling aspect of it, that unpredictability. And the other part of the unpredictability is the unpredictability of response to treatment. When we start someone on treatment for epilepsy medication, there's at least a 50% chance that the medications will not successfully control the seizures. But there's no way of knowing if that outcome is going to happen until the patient does or does not have another seizure. And that may be 12 months, it may be a year, it may be 2 years later when that second seizure occurs. So they've been taking a medication for several years without without it actually being the best medication, the most effective medication for them. So what our team, in collaboration with the Royal Melbourne Hospital and with the Department of Statistics at University of Melbourne have been doing is trying to identify genomic predictors, so markers in a person's gene that will predict whether they're going to respond well to a medication or not and help us choose the best medication. Now, people have been trying to do this for some time, and the problem is that they've been looking at individual genetic markers, and an outcome such as response to antiepileptic medication is incredibly complex, and any single genetic marker is never going to describe this outcome, just like a single genetic marker is never going to describe any other complex features such as intelligence or personality, etc. So what we need to do is we need to develop methods to look for patterns in genetic markers, multiple genes together. And we embarked on a pilot project that we looked at a relatively limited data set collected through the Royal Melbourne and the Austin hospitals here of patients who were newly treated for epilepsy, first time they received medications, and followed them over a couple of years to see how they went, and then looked at their genetic markers. And that was just over 200 patients, and we looked at about 5,000 markers. And we developed a method that was successfully validated of developing multi-genic predictors. But to make this really clinically useful, we need to utilise many, many more markers. We've now established a collaboration which involves Scotland and the UK and England and Finland, as well as Australia, which contains over 2,500 patients. Each patient has been genotyped for more than 500,000 genetic pieces of information, and we're going to apply our knowledge from our pilot project to see if we can develop and identify patterns in this enormously rich genotype-phenotype database to predict outcomes in how patients respond to medications in this enormous data set. But it is a tremendous bioinformatic computational problem to handle such an enormous data set, and there's no way that could be done without the supercomputing facility and the know-how that goes with it. So I know that we are in a unique position here in Victoria at having the richness and the power of the data set, and now the computation, we will have the computational expertise and hardware to allow us to really develop powerful predictors for individual drug response. And what we learn from this will be able to be applied to many other diseases in our community. So it is a really a major world first initiative, and we're very, very excited. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a molecular geneticist, and my research team is based here at the University of Melbourne in the Department of Pathology. My particular expertise is cancer genomics, with a particular interest in genetic susceptibility to cancer. Like many other research areas into disease, the supercomputer for the first time offers us the computing power to take advantage of new technologies. There are a large number of new technologies emerging for researchers to take advantage of, and I'm perhaps taking particular reference to new sequencing technologies which are established and being further established at the University of Melbourne and in our associated institutes around Parkville. Supercomputing has become a necessary part of our work because a single experiment on these new technologies generates a terabyte of data. I'm not really very enthusiastic to convert that to teraflop, because we don't really like to associate that word with experiments on a day-to-day basis. But it surely will be in that era of data size before too long. In many areas of diseases, this will, as you've heard from many other speakers this morning, advance our knowledge in a great number of areas, and particular to cancer research, and particularly to genetic susceptibility of cancer. We feel that this will advance our key goals in the area in a time frame that we perhaps wouldn't have anticipated and would never have been able to achieve without this computing capacity, particularly in the areas of individualised recommendations for disease prevention strategies, individualised risk assessments, particularly in the area of cancer risk assessment, individualised best treatments and individualised likely outcome estimates on an individual basis that we've never been able to provide as accurately as we will in the near future. This is because we will be able to move from a single gene or a few gene assessment of individuals into assessing their whole genome, almost as routine in the coming years. So from 1 or 2 genes into an entire gene collection from an individual will really advance our knowledge in these key areas. But perhaps more importantly, and perhaps looking a little bit more into the future, this will enable us to move into family design studies, which at the University of Melbourne and in key areas around the world, resources are available to move very rapidly into the area of family design studies, where the supercomputing will be able to support the analytical and bioinformatics that's required to achieve the key outcomes that researchers here and around the world are aiming for. Thank you.
I'm absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to come work with scientists here in Parkville. It's been a very, very useful journey for us to realize the strength that exists right here in Parkville. And I'm actually going to be locating a fraction of my team right here to work. As Tilak described, we will place our team here, and thereby the world will be our lab, Melbourne will be our lab, through which we will practice our research in life science. And the reason why I'm attracted to actually do this is because of the strength that exists amongst the research community, particularly the life science research community here in Melbourne. And I believe that the team that we will have here, IBM team that will be located here in Melbourne, will provide a window into the research expertise that exists in the broader IBM company, and we will form an extremely close partnership. Areas of research where I think we will aim to have a real good impact, echoing the previous panelists. Clearly, genomics is one place where we are going to have much more data tomorrow than the massive quantities of data that we have today. So we have to teach ourselves how to deal with that data and how to derive new insights from that data. So that is really a problem at the intersection of information technology and biology, and it must get a lot of our attention in terms of research, and the world expects that of us. A second area where I think we're going to have a lot of challenges and hopefully very useful breakthroughs is in how we apply this scale of computing to do very large-scale simulations, model biological systems down to the individual proteins, or at the whole organ level, for example, modeling an organ such as complex as the heart, or as complex as portions of the brain. So working in areas of systems biology and multi-scale modeling applied to these areas is absolutely crucial. I think new insights are going to be derived from that, and we're looking in a very excited manner to doing work in that space. And I think a third problem that will be at the intersection of how life sciences gets applied to medical care and actually delivering that and improving care would be at the intersection of life science insights and the healthcare informatics, where indeed studies of large populations, cohorts, and whole genome analysis of such cohorts is also going to be a place where new insights will be derived. So that's sort of the spectrum of activities that, not to exclude anything else, but clearly these are things that emerge right away, and I look forward to actually doing this sort of research with the team here. Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to just pick up on a couple of the themes that other speakers have made, which I think will resonate with those in the room, but which in fact underpin the reason why this has been an important project. We've heard this described as a partnership between one of the world's great universities and one of the world's great research-based companies. And in fact, it's very interesting just to consider that IBM spends in the order of $6 billion a year on research and development, and currently, I believe, houses 5 Nobel Prize winners, that they are a research organisation of the highest class. It is therefore a matter of marvel to me that they've chosen to make their first ever research investment in the Southern Hemisphere in the city of Melbourne. It speaks very much to the quality of what is already in place here, and it speaks to the vision of our leaders who make this kind of thing possible. It is terribly important to realise that we are not just talking about investment in machinery. As RJ just said, I think the most significant part of this will be the relocation of specialised IBM researchers to Melbourne to help our biological sciences community to do the kind of work that we know will come from this computer. I think If we are fortunate, what we will see is a very significant growth in that investment, because it is that partnership that will improve our research capabilities. But the partnership, as we have heard, is broader than just a university and a company. The state government has been fundamentally important to all of this. It could not have happened without the vision of John Brumby and his team and the strong support of DIRD making all of this happen. It of course creates problems for us. We have now a bright new toy that will help us to do greater research, but we have to have now the toys that will feed the data into the machine, and John will be talking about that with you shortly. But right from the outset, I think we need to be very clear about something. To describe this as a partnership just between the University of Melbourne and a company is not the right way of thinking about it at all. This is a partnership between the life sciences community of Victoria across the whole of the state and IBM. It is a partnership that will let all of the researchers in this state do research that is more relevant and of greater impact. And we need to make sure right from the word go that that is how we construct this and that that is how it operates. And I do want to express my appreciation to so many of our colleagues from outside the University of Melbourne who at very short notice have chosen to come up and to help us to celebrate what it is we're celebrating today. So what we're going to do is we're going to co-invest in state-of-the-art infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that's required to take a really strong research tradition and to drive it hard into the future. We're going to pool our research capabilities and in particular our people so that we can tackle the really big problems jointly. And in doing that, we should be able to do better research. We should be able to do research which is more of the kind of research that the community wants of us, that research which tackles the really big issues that will confront us over the next few decades. It will improve our capabilities to contribute to the great issues of our time, to help with the economic development of Victoria and to contribute to the intellectual life of this city. In this audience, there are a very large number of people who've been important in making this happen. It's not possible to thank you today, but you know who you are, and let me just finish by saying thank you to all those who've been mentioned.